So the lack of attainable housing is at crisis levels in urban and rural communities across Ontario, and it's getting worse. Homelessness is increasing in Waterloo Region with an average annual growth of 28% since 2020. In the past 5 years, chronic homelessness has increased by 129%. There are around 600 people experiencing chronic homelessness who are on the prioritized access to housing supports list in Waterloo Region. Many require supportive housing to exit homelessness, but the 570 existing supporting housing units in our community are already at capacity. Waterloo Region Alliance to End Homelessness told me about the work that they are doing.
Thank you so much for participating today. Can you please tell me about Waterloo Region Alliance to End Homelessness? What motivated you and how did you pull together?
We started as faith communities. So we came together in virtual space thinking that we would find a mission that we all aligned with. And the most obvious one was the housing crisis. And our church, Trinity United, had already thrown its support behind supportive housing. And then from there, this past summer, we reached out and wanted to bring other advocates together. I think that there's still a lot of education in terms of just crisis and chaos that is unleashed in someone's life when they find themselves homeless. So that's a very big priority.
So you're coming at a place of empathy and education, and I think that's so key because there's so many misunderstandings and misconceptions of who these people are.
Exactly.
They are our neighbors, they are brothers or sisters, our family members, and they deserve compassion. So your number one priority from the Alliance, what is that?
That we need to get ahead of the crisis. We're not ahead of that crisis. It keeps growing. And so to get ahead of that crisis, we really believe that support housing is an answer.
Who have you spoken to so far, and what kind of responses have you received?
So we had conversations with Show, the Working Center, Bus of Friendship, the Community Health Center, all the service providers that seem to be connected to the issues. We've spoken to NPPs, MPs, retired politicians.
What do you think the barriers are to supportive housing?
I think the barrier right now is that we are not working at the province on that. And everywhere we go, we do hear that statement that the province is just not at the table when it comes to that game, housing with supports.
Well, you're absolutely right, because housing is a provincial responsibility. That leadership is needed to solve what you've called a humanitarian crisis.
More and more Ontarians are unhoused, and while the provincial government now has 37 cabinet ministers, none of them has the job of focusing on this crisis. That's why there are so many unanswered questions that span more than a dozen ministries. So the financial and social impacts being felt by municipalities across the province is huge, and it's being left to not-for-profits like Supportive Housing of Waterloo to help people who have experienced long periods of homelessness.
So Brian, thanks so much for sitting down with us to talk about supportive housing and the housing crisis in Ontario. Can you tell us a little bit about, how many people live in Show's homes?
So we operate 3 buildings at 64 units of deeply affordable housing and on-site supports.
Okay.
We skew older, so 84% of our residents are over the age of 60. We house the hardest to house. So people on the streets, in the shelters, in the encampments, in the tent cities, that's who Show is housing.
Give an idea of what kind of services actually you provide. Like, what are the supports?
So the key for this type of housing to work is by it being supportive. So that means providing things like access to food security programs, counseling, on-site healthcare, social recreational programs, helping our residents feel connected to their community, their neighbors. So because we're staffed 24/7, we can work with and we can support residents whether they're in crisis or they just need someone to talk to.
How are you funded? It sounds extensive.
We get our funding through 3 streams. The first is from the Region of Waterloo. So our service manager at the Region of Waterloo provides operational dollars, which essentially covers some programming, but mostly for staff.
Okay.
Secondly is rents. So when you're charging $500 and change for rent, that's not a winning business model. You're not making a lot of money that way. So what we have to do is we have to leverage and lean into fundraising.
But what are the financial advantages to being more proactive when it comes to dealing with homelessness?
An individual who's in supportive housing, it's costing the system less. So every $10 invested in supportive housing, savings of over $21 to the system.
Really? And so what are those savings, like healthcare, justice?
All of that.
All of that.
Yeah. So having someone stay in a shelter as opposed to supportive housing costs the system 3 times as much. And someone staying in a hospital bed as opposed to permanent supportive housing costs the system 22 times as much. So it just makes sense on all levels, from a compassion perspective, but also from a common sense and a financial perspective. And I can assure you that supportive housing is best practice and evidence-based to show that it is the best way to house individuals who have been on the streets for years at a time and give them the best chance of reaching the greatest potential.
Totally agree.
Having the security of a safe place to call home should be the right of every Canadian. I met with one of Show's residents who explained how their life has been transformed by supportive housing.
So, Rob, I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to sit down and tell us your story and tell us about your journey. Can you start by just telling us what was your life like before you moved to supportive housing of Waterloo?
Arrived in Gulf.
Yeah.
I had applied at all the housing places.
Yeah.
And when I called them to say I really desperately needed a place, she said, you're about 8,000 down on the list.
Oh dear.
Because there's just thousands of people.
How did you feel when she told you you were?
That was pretty brutal.
How old were you at this point?
68.
68.
So she said, there is a place that we can probably get you in that would be better for you.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to stay at Bridges for a night. So I went to Bridges at 8 o'clock, checked in, and 11 o'clock they made us put beds on the floor. And there was about 60 or 70 people sleeping on the floor. I ended up being there for 3 days, 3 nights, sleeping on the floor.
Yeah. How were you feeling when you were there? Were you scared?
Yes.
How has your life changed?
I have a nice kitchen, and it's small, but I make my own food.
Yeah.
I'm working with a dietitian because of my diabetes, and we go through different menus all the time.
So you're definitely healthier too.
Much healthier.
Yeah. So would you say that the most positive difference is, your health and your well-being? Now
Yes.
you have stable housing?
Yes. You tend to be, depression can kind of fit in when you're in a bad place. So now that doesn't happen.
What would you tell people who think that, people who are seniors or anybody actually who becomes homeless?
Homeless people were not elderly. That's new.
Yes,
And it's only the last 5 years that's become a crisis.
that's right. Well, your story is very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Homelessness is a humanitarian crisis, and we need the province of Ontario to make it a healthcare priority. Supportive housing provides better health outcomes, it saves money, and that's a win-win for all of us in this great province.